I've been asked to set the scene about what skills is, and so what I decided to do was to start off with a definition, but then show how widely skills extends in a variety of different ways. So the definition I've chosen there is that skills is the combination of technical, cognitive and behavioural competences which enable a worker to acquire and retain decent work. But I think we have, although that seems fairly all-encompassing, I think we have to remember that in there's also the need for entrepreneurship skills, there's also the need for business skills. And as we grapple with the question of skills, we have to remember that the type and location of work is changing. Whilst technology has eaten into the number of low-skilled jobs available around the world, it's also eating into the medium-skilled routine jobs which a majority of workers do. And so we're seeing a continuing decline in the number or in the proportion rather of medium-skilled jobs, and that impacts obviously then on what skills we should be teaching and how we should be preparing people for the world of work. We know that there's a big urban drift, and that in the future there will be the majority of workers will be in urban areas, and that migration will remain steady at the very least, but will probably grow. In many countries in which our participants here today work, a lot of young people do not complete primary schooling or only have primary schooling. And while the primary schooling and perhaps traditional apprenticeships can lead to jobs in the informal sector, we know that in order for people to gain jobs in the formal sector, which is where we really want them to be, then they really need secondary or higher education. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just quickly go through how this breadth of skills development is reflected in a variety of ways. So the four ways I've divided this are looking at the variation in education backgrounds of people who participate in skills development, looking at the range of types of skill which learners require, the range of ages that we have to deal with in skills development, and the range of sectors. So the next slide, please, John, looks at the variation in education backgrounds. And unlike some other subsectors of education, in skills development, we can be working with people who range from having little or no primary education and who require learning support to prepare for semi-skilled work, through to learners who've completed primary or lower secondary education and perhaps have the basics then to enable further learning to prepare for operative or craft level work. But skills development goes right through as well to working with people who have completed senior secondary or even tertiary education and who now require practical skills and knowledge for technician jobs. And these technician jobs can be really quite sophisticated jobs. We're not just talking about what in the past would have been a craft worker, but really in this day and age, people with highly developed technician skills. We do find in some countries where there's high unemployment amongst university graduates that the graduates themselves are then reverting and going into skills development for technician work. I know we've got Martin Johnson on the line from Mozambique, and I think the current Skills for Employment project in Mozambique is reflected in a way in those three layers, because it's working with people both in the first level where they have little or no education, right through to people who are seen as tomorrow's managers in Mozambique. And then the next slide, please, looks at the age range. Again, unlike some sectors or subsectors of education, in skills development we can be working with people who are potentially still in primary school and who require some introduction, some vocational preparation for the world of work. But that can also take us right through to lifelong learning for adults, whether it's second chance for those who have not been given the necessary skills during their initial participation in education, reskilling, where we've got a fast changing skill needs in the labour market, and updating for people who are already in work. And this age range is perhaps reflected in the work in the World Bank is doing in India on India's school reform programme, where it's introducing vocational subjects into the secondary school curriculum. We've got an example in Nepal of Finish Aid, which is introducing employability skills into the school curriculum. Of course, in Pakistan, we've got good turnout from Pakistan today. The Punjab Skills Development Fund is working with rural women without any skills for today's labour market. And so we need to look for the possibilities of introducing vocational preparation into general education programmes. Then on the next slide, thanks John, I wanted to look at the range of types of skills that someone undertaking a skills development programme might be expected to have or to learn. We're not just looking at technical skills in the bottom triangle there, although technical skills are obviously critical, particularly those in science, technology, education and maths, which is where the high demand is going to come from in the next 10 to 15 years. But we also need to respond to the very strong view that employers are giving that employability skills are at least as important as technical skills, if not more important. And by employability skills, of course, we mean teamwork, we mean leadership, we mean negotiation, problem solving, all those things that we all use every day in work, but are perhaps not entirely aware that we're doing that. And then, of course, there are core skills as well, particularly for those who've not had a good experience or not been able to access formal schooling as a young person. They may be lacking core skills of literacy and numeracy, and sometimes, in some cases, IT would be regarded as a core skill as well. And I think we have to remember how very different the backgrounds of people approaching skills development provision is. If you take, for example, Syrian refugees in Jordan and Lebanon now, many of the women who are seeking work, many of the refugee women, because they're coming from a conflict situation, are heads of household for the first time and have never been in a formal or even informal working situation. So they're coming with a very different background from perhaps your average skills learner who may have had some years in education and then experience at least of the informal labour market. So we need to be embedding employability skills and entrepreneurship into technical programs. We're looking for our workers of the future to be T-shaped so that they have in-depth technical skills, but this broad ability to apply those skills in teams across a broad range of disciplines. And the next slide takes us to the range of sectors that we might find skills development programs in. Of course, there are some core occupational skills, but then these need to be often contextualized by sector. So, for example, in some work I did for DFID last year on East Africa oil and gas, we were looking mainly at skilling people up with construction skills, but these needed to then be able to be applied in the oil and gas sector. So better really to equip people with generic skills which are applicable across a range of sectors, rather than to specialise too narrowly initially, because that retains their mobility and their ability to apply themselves when the labour market changes, to move with the labour market and apply their skills in areas of growth and demand. Some training institutions will offer that type of generic training, others will offer more sector-specific training. So you get some skills, and an example might be something like electrical wiring, which can apply across sectors, but then you can get others, such as machine sewing, which may only be able to be applied in the RMG sector. And also what we're hearing is a high potential in the agribusiness sector. And then the last slide, I think, is about labour markets and the need for DFID staff in country to know their labour market and to know which labour market the skills development programmes that are being put in place are aiming at. I've put down there that there's local labour markets, regional ones, national ones and international ones, and depending on which labour market people are being prepared for will determine to a large extent which skills are taught, what employment services are required to support graduates, what the links with employers need to be, whether there's a need for language teaching over and above the local language, and whether there is a need for recognised qualifications so that skills are recognised beyond the local area. National labour market information studies won't necessarily help you to understand the local labour market, which might be better done by training institutions on their own. I also want to mention again here the expansion of urban labour markets and the fact that training institutions must themselves become more entrepreneurial so that they are aware of the labour market that they're training their trainees for, their learners for, and are supplying them or equipping them with the skills to be able to operate successfully in that labour market. And then just finally, I want to refer you to the reading pack which was prepared prior to this roundtable discussion, which is to help people in country, DFID officers in country, to have discussions with their potential beneficiaries. And I've suggested in that you might like to look at skills development under 4 headings, or use 4 headings in discussion with potential beneficiaries. The first would be understanding employers' needs, then supplying the skills which employers need, be these technical skills or employability skills, looking at bridging the gap between supply and demand, and then finally engaging employers in the provision of training and suggesting that there are a variety of ways of doing that. But under each of these headings there is a reasonably concise document that I suggested you might want to look at to just increase your understanding against each of those subheadings.